emergence of segregation. As you'll see, segregation doesn't emerge all at once. It's not just suddenly there after the Civil War. It was a process.
As white men, we are not sorry, and we do not propose to apologize for anything that we have done. We took the government away from them in 1876. We did take it. We did not disenfranchise the Negroes until 1895. Then we had a constitutional convention convened, which took the matter up calmly, deliberately, and avowedly, with the purpose of disenfranchising as many of them as we could, under the 14th and 15th Amendments. Ben Tillman.
He was speaking specifically for the white farmer and made that clear from the beginning. You know, the men that he was appealing to, they liked this message that he gave about independence, about better farming methods, and about race. It's construction of a new kind of white identity. He's able to push through a new constitution. The 1895 Constitution you can think of as the disenfranchisement Constitution, because really its purpose was to disenfranchise African American voters while getting around the 14th and 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment gave them the right to vote. So what you see in South Carolina and in other southern states, beginning really in the 1880s, is a number of elaborate efforts to get around the ramifications of the 15th Amendment. The 1895 Constitution did that. To be able to prove that you could read, or prove that you had paid taxes on at least $300 worth of property. And the most commonly used was called the Understanding Clause. How this worked is that, you go in to vote, and the Registrar of Voters is sitting there, and the Registrar of Voters who controls the polling place is white and is part of the power structure. And he would say, read this, and then interpret it. The 1895 Constitution, kind of finishing the work of taking the ballot, taking the power of the vote away from African Americans. There were only actually a fairly small number of Republicans, black Republicans, still voting. There were city and county laws in South Carolina that effectively disenfranchised voters. There was this method used called the 8-box law, the whole point of which was essentially to confuse black voters. There would be a series of boxes. You couldn't just cast a single vote. You actually cast 8, sometimes more actually, even though it's called the 8-box law. You would cast these votes, and each ballot had to be put in the correct box. If it wasn't put in the correct box, then it was no good. If your grandfather voted, then you can vote, which of course for former slaves, let them out. You could vote if you could prove that you had voted in 1878 and you had 2 white people who were willing to testify to the 1915 law that segregated the workplace, that banned African Americans from working in the textile mills. You did have sort of law codifying what was already being done by custom. So in the textile mills, for example, African Americans really had never been hired to work.
At the turn of the 20th century, Niagara movement, the NAACP, attempted to change things in South Carolina and improve the lives of African Americans. They do strike down some of the more egregious problems that they faced at the turn of the 20th century. There was also a campaign of terror that continued to exist in this country where people were lynched and where race riots took place. We need to do something about these kind of problems. We have to stop lynching. We have to stop race riots. On the lowest point in terms of race relations, in terms of American history, because of the violence, the Jim Crow discrimination, the scientific racism that took place. In an attempt to come up with ideas and strategies to challenge the racism of the period, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, it did take some action against racism, fighting against peonage, fighting against the disfranchisement of African Americans. Washington advocated this idea of accommodation. And of course, he also advocated what was called industrial education, that African Americans shouldn't strive for higher education or strive even for the leadership role, but to work with whites, be sort of a second-class citizen and the workforce of the South. African Americans responded to Jim Crow, segregation, and discrimination in three ways: by accommodation, such as Booker T. Washington; by protest, such as W.E.B. Du Bois; and finally by migrating, by leaving